Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
They have a two-time MVP, but postseason success has eluded Baltimore. What can Lamar Jackson and the Ravens do to get over the hump? Also, Team USA escaped with a victory over South Sudan, but only thanks to LeBron James's heroics. And Xander Schauffele suddenly can't stop winning majors. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs are in our rearview mirror now, so long that the baseball playoffs are almost in our windshield. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
They're the reigning number one seed in the AFC. They have the reigning league MVP. And yet no one seems to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC. Someone who talks every day about the Baltimore Ravens, Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens, joins me now. And Kevin, this is a little bit of a new look Ravens team. They bring in Derrick Henry. They try and restock the cabinets through the draft, which is something that they do as well as any team in the league. But they've also had some people raiding from those cabinets from the coaching staff. We have to see what it's going to look like with Zach Orr versus Mike McDonald. So as we head into training camp, what should we be looking for from Baltimore?
To me, this has been almost a transitional period. And you talked about it. They lost a lot of guys this offseason, from Mike McDonald to Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Jadeveon Clowney. They've lost 60% of their starting offensive line. This is a new look team with the same core. Lamar Jackson still there, Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton. Their stars are there, but they're going to have to be relying on a bunch of youth this season because they didn't go out there and replace every single guy they lost one for one with a veteran. Derrick Henry was a vet they added. Eddie Jackson they signed over the weekend.
Yep.
But other than that, it's really been through the draft, like you talked about, a couple pieces here and there. But this has been something the Ravens have been preparing for a couple of years now, where they understood that, one, their 2024 free agent class was incredible. They weren't going to be able to keep everybody. And so they drafted as such. They drafted Trenton Simpson 2 years ago when Patrick Queen was still under contract. Now he is slated to replace Patrick Queen. Rashad Bateman now stepping into a role after not proving a ton over his first 3 years due to health reasons. He's somebody that is going to have a massive role. A bunch of younger offensive linemen. It's going to have to be a really important year because up front, got to protect Lamar, got to open up running lanes for Derrick Henry. But Kevin Zeitler is one of the most consistent linemen in this league. Morgan Moses played well for them last season. Both those guys are out the door. So I think a lot of people look, Peter, at Baltimore's AFC Championship loss last year and just how disappointing it was and the fashion they lost as well. They obviously abandoned their identity. They got flustered by Kansas City. And while they were so dominant and number one seed, like you talked about in the regular season, they were not the best team in the playoffs. That obviously went to the Chiefs. So to me, they're almost being a little underrated at this point. This will be a harder path for the Ravens this season. Joe Burrow coming back, Deshaun Watson, plenty of other injured quarterbacks and teams getting better. But the Ravens are still one of the premier teams in the AFC at this point.
I look at their offseason and I look at the pass catchers and I go, okay, so just going to run it back. And then you add a day 3 pick in Tez Walker in the 4th round. Like, make the case for me, Kevin. Tell me why they have enough at a pass catcher right now, because to me, I go, I'd like to see, I don't know, a lot more here.
Yeah, and that's been a theme for really the course of Lamar Jackson's entire career and even dating back before that. They believe in Zay Flowers as a number one. I know he's not the prototypical, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf type number one build, but he certainly is a 3-level receiver who's an exceptional route runner and can get open in a multitude of ways. And so to me, that's okay. If you want Zay as your one, that's great. But they are taking a bit of a risk here in keeping Rashad Bateman as your number 2. I personally would have liked to see them bring in somebody. I mean, I know Cortland Sutton, I don't think is available for trade, but that type of receiver would have been a perfect number 2 complement. But they really want to just see what they have this year in Rashad Bateman. This could work out great for him. They signed Bateman to a 3-year, $15 million extension because there was a whole fiasco with his 5th-year option where last year he actually didn't report to training camp on time. That voided his 5th-year option. He didn't realize that he fired his agent because of it. It was a whole thing. So he got the extension, but then it's Nelson Aguilar. You mentioned Tez Walker, Deontay Hardy. They signed mainly to be a return guy. There's still a couple guys out there in free agency. Doesn't Michael Thomas move the needle for you? Hunter Renfrow. I mean, at this point, it probably would have to be via a trade. But the solace you can take away here is that Mark Andrews is technically this team's number 1 receiver, because that's how this passing offense looks like. Isaiah Likely is expected to take a massive step forward this season as a number 2 behind Mark Andrews. So if those guys can work in tandem, I think they will be okay, because this is a run-first team regardless. But I do think we're going to see more run-pass balance this season. And overall, I think that will help guys. But at the same time, if Bateman can't stay healthy or it's another disaster year, they're going to have some catching up to do and be behind the 8 ball.
So as we move forward here, you mentioned earlier Mike McDonald and the changes on the defense. What is your expectations for how that will impact this defense? Because McDonald is one of those guys who seem like one of the very few coaches in the league, Kevin, who as a defensive coordinator moves the needle. And we don't know. Zach Orr, a former NFL player, NFL linebacker, he certainly, on the sidelines, we see the energy. We hear from players, hey, this is a guy that they really, really like. But that is got to be at least a little bit of a concern. How do you expect that to impact the way that this team looks, though, on the field?
Yeah, I don't expect it to be all sunshine and rainbows for the entire season. I think there has to be a realistic expectation that Zach Orr he has no play calling experience. You mentioned his 3 years in the league. He was a second team All-Pro his last season before retiring medically due to the neck injury. But as a defensive coordinator, there's no play calling experience at any level. And that is a bit concerning. Matt McDonald obviously went to Michigan for a season under Jim Harbaugh. He turned around that defense and really set the stage for that team, and then came back to Baltimore in the same role and excelled. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for McDonald either. There was a 28-point lead he blew against Miami in a second ever game, and that was one that people still look back on here and wonder what in the world happened.
Yeah.
And the Ravens, this is a contending team, right? Obviously, Orr is somebody that almost is their Mike McDonald-esque defensive coordinator, a younger guy, someone who doesn't have as much experience in the coaching world. But the Ravens start off with Kansas City in week 1. And then they have other teams they have to play, like Las Vegas, Dallas, Buffalo, Cincinnati. That is no easy stretch early on in the season. So it's about Zach Orr hitting the ground running here so that the Ravens can get momentum early. The Ravens wanted to go internal here so they could keep their system. It goes back from McDonald's to Don Martindale to Dean Pease. And by the way, if you want to be defensive coordinator of the Ravens, just be their inside linebacker coach. That's been the succession plan for like the past 5 defensive coordinators. But they believe in Orr. They understood their coaching staff was going to get a little thin in terms of guys leaving. Anthony Weaver goes to Miami. Denard Wilson goes to Tennessee. And there was rumblings that Zach Orr could have gone to maybe Green Bay or Seattle. So they kept one of their guys. I expect the system to largely remain the same, but there are going to be changes like there are with every coordinator. And that to me will be the interesting part of the whole thing.
Stay up to date all year on the Baltimore Ravens by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Ravens on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, there was plenty of drama on the international hardwood with Team USA over the weekend. Before we get to that, the WNBA All-Star Game was highlighted by a record-breaking performance. No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. We've talked about what's going to take for the Baltimore Ravens to finally reach the Super Bowl, and FanDuel gives the Ravens the 3rd best odds to win it all, plus 950 behind the San Francisco 49ers and Kansas City Chiefs. You may recall they just played in the Super Bowl. They're at 6-1. Speaking of the Chiefs, they play host to the Ravens to kick off the NFL season as 3-point favorites. There's also some tough sledding in the early going for Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers, who are 1.5-point road dogs against the Philadelphia Eagles, though that game is in Brazil, not in Philly. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. The WNBA All-Star Game did not disappoint. Angel Reese dropped a double-double off the bench because that's what she does. Caitlin Clark set a rookie record with 10 assists in an off shooting night, but the MVP was Dallas Wings guard Arike Ogunbowale. Ogunbowale finished with an all-star record 34 as she led Team WNBA past Team USA 117-109.
Jesse Morrison here for Locked On Women's Basketball at the Footprint Center, where Team WNBA took down Team USA 117-109. Arike Ogunbowale with 34 points in the second half to win the game's MVP. It was just a great weekend overall with WNBA Live going on at the Phoenix Convention Center. You had Alicia Gray winning both the skills and three-point contest last night, making history in doing that. And then Pitbull at halftime of the All-Star game was electric and exciting, of course. Just overall a fun experience.
Over on the diamond, the Miami Marlins defeated the New York Mets 4-2 despite catcher Nick Fortes making 3 throwing errors, a first by a catcher in club history. The Mets are down 2-1 in the series versus the Fish, struggling to make any headway in a tightly contested and a wild card race.
The Marlins beat the Mets for the second time in a row, 4-2 at Lone Depot Park. They're 5-4 against them this season. They've only won the season series once against the Mets in the last 10 years, 2017, for all you stat geeks out there. And they are on their way toward that today. They wrap up the 4-game series tomorrow. And the way that they've played these last couple of days has been very encouraging with all the things that have gone on lately.
Wide receiver Devontae Adams wants Tom Brady to be his quarterback. The Las Vegas Raiders wideout said in a recent interview that he doesn't care how old Tom Brady is. He'd take him right now, even if he was 58 years old. Adams said, I don't care. Tom knows how I feel about him. He's got to still be able to throw it better than half these dudes in the league. If my 2 best options were a 67 overall in Madden and Uncle Rico on steroids, I'd probably take 58-year-old Brady for a spin as well. It's Team USA men's basketball. We're talking about LeBron James. We're talking about Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. South Sudan's not going to be a problem, right? Well, it wasn't ultimately a problem because LeBron James showed up at the end, hits the closeout bucket in a 101-100 warm-up for the Olympics. John Corrales from Locked On NBA and Locked On Celtics, of course, joins me now. Do I have to call you NBA champion, John Corrales? I feel like I do a little bit here, John.
Yes.
And it was, there were plenty of Celtics involved in this one for Team USA, but how concerned should Team USA fans be of this one?
No, look, this is the ultimate shooting variance game, right? That South Sudan got a ton of 3-pointers. And I think what this game showed was the absolute value, power of that 3-point shot. That any team anywhere, South Sudan can get hot. And if the other team, even Team USA, if they're cold, it can be dicey. And that's just how the 3-point shot goes. And that was the big reason why. And turnovers, like LeBron had 4 first half turnovers and then didn't turn the ball over again in the second half. And suddenly when LeBron's playing like LeBron, yeah, that helps. And, you know, I'll throw a little plug in for Boston Celtic champion Derek White, who had 5 assists in 11 minutes, showing that he's a good fit. But yeah, I don't think it's concern necessarily. I think that 3-point shooting, the variance was at full display in this game.
Yeah, and so there are a couple things that I think that leads people to want to talk about. Okay, so do you need to find ways to get more shots at the rim? How do you do that? Isn't that why Joel Embiid is on the team? Like that seems like part of the conversation that we should be having here. And also, I understand, shooting variance is part of the deal. And guys like Drew Holiday, who always guard, did the work at the end to defend. But it's sort of like, shouldn't the defense for this team be good enough against the talent of a South Sudan where you don't have to worry about the shooting variance that much? Sure.
Look, it was also a friendly against a 43-point underdog. And I'm sure the first half and all the turnovers and the way they played was a little more indicative of, it's right. South Sudan, right? Like,
let's just roll the ball out there.
Yeah, and so that's what happens, and that's how shooting variance gets into play. So you'd like to think that, okay, they got a little bit of a scare there. They know that the next time they play, which will be soon, because they're in the same group, it might be a little bit different. You can go out there and say, all right, you know what, we are going to clamp down in the first half and kind of show what we're made of and let's end any of this shooting variance talk. But honestly, I'm going to channel Joe Mazzulla here because he loves these types of games where the shooting variance is the story and it's not going to the rim, especially South Sudan. They were packing the paint. They were protecting the rim. You gotta ramp up your 3-point shooting. And with the 3-point shooting that the Team USA has, you should just let it fly. I think they passed up a ton of open looks in the first half that could have been 3-point shots. And even though they were a little cold, just keep firing and don't fall into the, well, we can beat them off the dribble. Let's just go to the rim, because at the rim is where they got into a lot of trouble. And that's what led to the transition. And that's what led to the transition 3-pointers and offensive rebounds and stuff like that. Classic game. I've seen that game happen to the Celtics a ton over the past 2 seasons. So I am very experienced on how those types of games go.
A little disappointed that you channeling Joe Mazzulla did not result in a town quote, but maybe next time we can get that. It did strike me over the weekend. You had Team USA on the women's side losing to the WNBA All-Stars, which is basically Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and a bunch of people who just didn't make the Olympic team. And then you have this game. I think it is a reminder of how good globally basketball is right now. Yeah. And at any given, Diana Taurasi said it after that All-Star game. Look, we can't just roll the ball out here. Like, we have to take every one of these games seriously. And I think if you're a Team USA fan, you have to be going, this has to be a wake-up call to both of these teams to say, hey, look, shooting variance is a thing. And if you don't play hard, if you don't play focused, any one of these teams can shoot enough threes that they can sink us. That's right. That's 100% right. And it's all about just making the right play and trusting your teammates. And this is why fit is important. And this is why I liked Derek White being the guy that made Team USA when Kawhi left. As much as Jaylen Brown was upset, and as much as he is deserving of being on the team. Yeah, I like the fit for Derek White, and I like the fact that he was instrumental down the stretch. I kind of jokingly said, Celtics champion and all that stuff, but he's a big reason why the Celtics won the championship, because he played that way, because he was able to make those plays, those pick and roll plays, the lobs to Anthony Davis, making those right plays, the right reads to make sure that you're getting easy buckets. And that is the lesson for everybody on both sides of Team USA. South Sudan has former NBA players on it. They're not obviously as good as Team USA, but they do have some kind of fringe NBA level talent. And you never know when those guys with something to prove, guys who want to be in the league, going up against the best the league has to offer, they're going to give their absolute best. So you have to make sure that you respect the game, respect your opponent, come out and make those right plays and take the shots when they're there, so you can go out and play good basketball and go ahead and win that gold medal. Stay up to date all year on the NBA by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On NBA on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, Xander Schauffele is on an absolute tear this year, winning his second major in 3 tries. Xander Schauffele won the Open Championship on Sunday in one of the more difficult final 2 rounds that we've seen at a major championship in the last year or two. And it comes at a time when Xander is experiencing a revelatory period in his career. This was why for years he was a disappointing golfer. These were the moments. These are the major championships that had eluded him for so long. Back at the Players, when Xander could not come through on Sunday, he was asked about it, and he mentioned the haters, and he said of himself, I'm one of them right now, because he should have won. He knew he should have won. And we have seen so many golfers over the years, so many athletes in any sport over the years with talent continually, habitually come up short. And it seemed like that was where Xander Schauffele's career was headed. But every year at the majors, it didn't matter. Top 5, top 10, seemingly every time he teed it up at a major championship. But now he's showing why for years we went What's this guy's deal? Why can't he do it? He could win these other tournaments, even high quality tournaments with the best fields, just not at majors. Well, now, two very different tests. The PGA Championship, a classic birdie fest, versus a championship being held at Royal Troon, where on Saturday, guys were hitting driver on par 3. We're talking about PGA Tour, World Tour pros having to hit driver on par 3s. That's the kind of test this was, because of the elements, because of the golf course. And Xander Schauffele was up to it. He is now stamped and underlined his shortcomings by showing us we were right to believe he really is that good. And now, in 2 and 3 tries, the question is going to be, how many more can he get? But now that question becomes celebratory. Man, how many could he win? Not, man, how many should he have won? It must be a remarkable weight off his shoulders. And so much so that maybe now the lid is off and he can go on a run. And finally, Bronny James has finally started showing some potential. After starting Summer League shooting just 22% in his first 4 games, James stepped things up, scoring 25 points in his last 2 contests before being shut down. Lakers Summer League coach Dane Johnson describes him as a secondary playmaker that is just trying to learn. The LA Lakers had their best offensive performance of the Summer League against the Chicago Bulls without Bronny on Saturday. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Lost, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, who's the most intriguing player as NFL training camps get going? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.